So to start at the beginning, over the pandemic and probably since then, I ended up doing two things a lot. One, walking the dog, and another, running. And while doing this, I started listening to a lot of books. And a lot of books turned out to be quite a lot of books about data and technology and superintelligence and this, that, and the other. And my mind started to sort of race a little bit and wonder what was going to happen with this and where it was all going and were other people thinking about it and all of the kind of things like that. And I don't really go on social media that much, so maybe that would have been a good outlet for this or something. I should have gone on Twitter. But unfortunately, one day I got back from a dog walk and I sent Oscar an email and I sort of like splurged out this abstract, which turned out to be the abstract of this event, which was kind of, look, you know, who's looking at this? What's actually going on here? So that's kind of the backstory to the presentation. I do work in technology a lot and understand a lot about data and maybe how companies move around data, but I don't necessarily really know where this is going to go for society. And it does frighten me a bit that no one's really looking at this. And I'll try and explain, you know, what my thoughts are, how I got to those thoughts and where we are. So ChatGPT is the sort of thing to talk about. So let's talk about ChatGPT. So I subscribed to a Nick Cave newsletter, and obviously someone decided to email Nick and say, oh, look, I've written a song on ChatGPT in the style of Nick Cave. Nick wasn't impressed, not unsurprisingly. And his sort of, this song is bullshit, I thought sort of summed it up. But it sort of does start to go to one of the themes that I started to think about. So one is, what's the difference between humans and machines? I mean, yes, there's some really obvious ones, but when it sort of really comes down to it, can machines give us a sort of human experience? And as the response went on, there are a couple of things that sort of struck me. The first one was this sort of idea that, you know, it can never be slowed down as it moves towards either a utopian future or total destruction, which is kind of the, you know, have we gone too far kind of bit in a way. But then also, you know, this idea of songs arising out of suffering and algorithms not feeling. And this is sort of like, you know, maybe this dynamic of humans and machines. So you start to kind of think, well, what is it to be human? What is it, you know, what have I done really that, you know, ChatGPT couldn't do? I've taken other people's thoughts and ideas and I've sort of synthesized them and sort of sprayed them randomly around in my head while walking the dog, and then sort of come out with things and dictated them into my phone and slowly built up a presentation. So does anyone really care if I've written this? I'm guessing most people would prefer it if I did, one way or another. And so I think we still have this preference that we would prefer maybe a person to do something or to instigate something or to be the creative force behind something than a machine. But if you take that to a sort of slightly ridiculous idea, you've kind of got, right, a machine washed my clothes, and you don't expect me to hand wash my clothes or sort of judge me for that in any way. So we're quite comfortable in some walks of life of machines doing what, you know, what can be done. Maybe in other walks of life would prefer the human to do it. So again, what's going on with this sort of dynamic? And again, there was always the sort of thing at school about if you gave enough monkeys typewriters, you know, they would come up with the works of Shakespeare. So does that mean that Shakespeare's not creative or less creative than, you know, or as creative as a monkey? Or is it the fact that you can sort of spot the kind of edition or the version that is Shakespeare? Maybe that's the genius he had. So a few people sort of, the quote at the top is what I've heard when people have talked about their experiences with ChatGPT. It's the sort of, it feels like someone telling you about their dream. It's not a sort of actual experience yourself. It's actually a sort of second-hand experience. So I don't know how many people listen to podcasts and kind of various things like that, but you know, most people have experimented with some sort of artificial text at the beginning of something. And you can sort of tell, right? You kind of know something's not quite right. And then the host says, oh, that was something I did in AI or generated the text. And you can sort of tell. So I think there's something more we have. And the kind of often where this sort of comes to is sort of this idea of consciousness and, you know, sort of our experience, you know, sort of what's the point in really being here? You know, other than sort of doing jobs and getting on and doing something, it is all about, you know, sort of our conscious experience of things. And so, with that kind of in mind, sort of, are we replaceable by machines? Well, is that replaceable by machines? There's a whole, sort of conscious being substrate dependent or independent. But I think it's worth just sort of noting at this point. But again, coming back to humans, I think we have a bit of a problem, or we're about to create a problem, which is we're very used to being the sort of dominant species on the world. We've been around for a while. We maybe haven't managed the world particularly well, or we have, but we're used to, pretty much coming and going as we please. We can do what we want. And the kind of question I've kind of got in a way is, are we about to do something really stupid by inventing things that are more intelligent than us, kind of thing? Were there sort of gorillas sitting around at one point, and then suddenly the humans came along, and the gorillas are a bit like, oh crap, right? we've now got to go and sit in a zoo forever. This isn't the life I was imagining. So are we kind of, do we not actually really get this? And, sort of by stumbling into this world and creating things that are, potentially more intelligent than us, are we actually, going to be in a situation where, the robots are coming, right, we're going to do something. So before we get too far into it, some definitions. So intelligence is defined as the ability to accomplish complex goals. So I can do something that's, more than one thing. Narrow intelligence is sort of best example, AlphaGo, Deep Blue beating Garry Kasparov. It can do one single thing. It's trained incredibly well to play chess. General intelligence is I can do a broad range of things. This is generally kind of humans. We can do this. And then the artificial side of that is to accomplish any cognitive task as well as humans. So what we're kind of talking about in terms of things going too far is this sort of artificial general intelligence. So 2 questions. Who thinks that AGI will be here before the end of the century? 1, no, 50% maybe, 50%? I'll go back 1. There you go. And who has travel insurance? Oh, slightly more. So why? We mitigate risks, right? We get travel insurance, not because we know something's going to happen, but because something might go wrong. So we spend some resources or some time and money or something on doing something before we go on holiday. So that's my kind of analogy with this. Does it really matter whether AGI will get here or not? There is definitely a chance it will do. And there's a survey here from the Future of Life, and I'll talk about them in a bit. But yeah, okay, people that happen to go to this website thought around 2050 would be the time. So, okay, people that work in this sort of field think it might happen. So my concerns is there's a significant chance, my opinion, that it will happen. The growth in the field is ungoverned and often driven by corporations. The field is poorly understood by general population, no offense to my mum or anyone like that, and the government. Institutions generally have been devalued. I think, sort of if you look back through what's happened through social media, what happened through COVID, any kind of institution, for right or wrong, has been undermined to some point. And this is potentially important as we go forward, because historically, institutions have been the guardians of how certain things have developed. So if we want to devalue them or not trust them, we might want to replace them with something else. And potentially society and all of us, not necessarily us in this room, but as a whole, and if you took 2016 as an example, i.e. Brexit and electing Trump, is probably not on the best sort of moral standing that we've been on for a while. So maybe we're not in the best hands to look after the planet. And just to cap it off, most technological advancements would generally benefit the few. So these are the things coming. A couple of quotes. So science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. And by wisdom, I think we're looking at the experience to deal with this. So again, we're all people that work in data. We can all potentially think about this and affect this. And I think the question we're trying to avoid in some way is, for those of you that have kids, your kids looking back at you and kind of going, well, why didn't you do something? You know, sort of, we knew it was happening. It was all over the press, and everyone just sort of carried on. So one of the books I read was a book called Life 3.0 by a guy called Max Tegmark. And he had a good framing of the question. And the question was, instead of maybe worrying, well, I suppose it's a way of describing it, but instead of just worrying about the negative things, maybe we should define what we want the future to look like. And we all kind of know, if we have jobs that have goals or incentives, that actually if you put goals in front of someone, people are quite good at actually meeting those goals. So I quite like this framework. So I started doing mind maps and looking at different scenarios. And I'm going to run through a couple of them now to raise some of the sort of scenarios, concerns, and problems. You don't have to read it all now if you're squinting. I'll come on to them. But again, the purpose of this within the context of this session is not necessarily to answer all those questions, but maybe to sort of prompt questions that, you know, we can talk about and talk to the panel about later. So I think the first scenario I broadly looked at was that humans would rule. We would control the AIs in some way, or if possible. And there was a kind of range with that. Apparently this has got a laser. Not really. So I left profit on there because I think a lot of things now are being driven by corporations, and I'll come back to this point. So the development of some of these things is being driven, or most of these things is being driven through sort of commercial enterprise. For this diagram or slide, I chose health as a domain, but there's lots of different areas we could look at and I'll come on to. And in a way, you can kind of use AI to either have good benefits or benign or evil benefits. So if you took health, you could say, okay, well, AI will be great. We can do better diagnosis. You know, that might help people, especially in sort of more, you know, sort of poorer or more developing countries. You know, this might really save lives. It will really make a difference. And similarly, if you're a kind of evil dictator type, you can then create more virulent pathogens. You can create more pandemics. You can kill people. You might better wipe out whole sort of neighboring countries or races or something. So, you know, there's a wide range, depending on sort of human nature, that we can do with this. Now, there's a quote here. I was going to try and do a sort of blankety blank thing, if anyone remembers the program, but I'm going to read it out, and then if anyone knows who made this quote, you can say, "Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for blank, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world." Any ideas? Elmo? No. Putin. Quite a while ago. So yeah, it's not exactly like the evil dictator scenario has gone unnoticed. So kind of questions and problems. So I chose health just for the first slide, but there's lots of areas. We could look at surveillance. If we put cameras up and use artificial intelligence to watch what everyone's doing, maybe we could save bad things happening to people in dark corners. You know, so maybe there's a benefit to it. But alternatively, maybe there's, you know, sort of the evil side of it. Maybe that means we monitor everyone and control everyone. Again, the same with weapons, content generation. And this is sort of really where a lot of the focus is at the moment. You know, there's a huge amount of, you know, sort of not really the sort of chat GPT generative stuff, but going back to kind of Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, the fact that we can actually generate things, change people's behavior, you know, sort of feed social media with things that will actually change people's opinion has long been around. And again, we can use that for good or bad. Probably most people would think it's generally used for bad. But all the way through this, I'm talking about good and bad. And there's a kind of question here, and I've tried to highlight the questions in red in terms of value alignment. So what is that? I'll come to that. And then if we have these powerful machines doing stuff, you know, what's to stop them going on beyond their objectives? So we have a sort of control breakout problem. And then on a sort of weird moral tangent, then if we had these machines, and if machines could be conscious, are we not enslaving conscious beings to do our bidding? And is that not a route we've been down already and is sort of fairly unpleasant in terms of humanity? So, sort of, again, it's sort of maybe weird and unusual, but, would we prefer, if we're going to have machines working for us, them all to be zombies? But obviously, if they're zombies, then how will they ever stop themselves doing kind of bad things or have any sort of idea of what's right and wrong? So, sort of a lot of questions around that. A lot of the work these days, as I've said, is driven by private enterprise as well. I think this is different to how maybe nuclear and other technologies have evolved in the past. And again, the sort of continual development of that can lead to sort of almost sort of arms race like approaches by people, which generally can either lead to sort of chaos, sort of total destruction, or people cheating and not really kind of following boundaries. And then there's a sort of interesting idea of using AI to actually solve the problem of what to do with AI. So could we actually use a sort of artificial general intelligence to come up with the answer to this, and then how to set up AI to further humanity for the rest of life? So just to dive into a couple of these, value alignment. What is a good decision? Whose values? There's a lot of people in the world. There's a lot of people with different values. We could talk about utility or sort of pragmatism. But again, often someone's gain is someone's loss. And then we've got the problem of time. Values will change over time. And if you look at organizations that have tried to maintain sort of value over time or value systems over time, you get to things like, the church and religious organizations. And I'm not sure they're kind of models that we necessarily want to put up to sort of base this kind of system on. And then if values change over time, can they learn? And are they actually able to say, I don't know the answer to this question at the right time? Instead of having some sort of probabilistic outcome that they have to guess the sort of best thing they can. So could we get a kind of human in the loop or some way of keeping them in touch and having a I don't know answer? And then finally, the kind of unintended consequences that generally comes up in a lot of conversations about optimizing. If I optimize, a robot to do something, it will just carry on doing it at the expense of everything in sight. There's a famous example about paperclips. If I tell my robot to make paperclips, it will just make paperclips. It will then start ripping up all the chairs and make more paperclips, and then slowly it will destroy the world for the sake of paperclips. So yeah, maybe you forgot to put the instruction in the code to say stop making paperclips when there's enough, or whatever the right code would be. Corporations. I'm sort of touching on this a lot, and I do think it is problematic. I don't think necessarily all corporations are bad, but it does seem to be the driver. If you look at what's happened with sort of the Bing chatbot, ChatGPT, there's this sort of weird unregulated testing. Stuff's just getting released, really, and we're the guinea pigs, which is quite exciting, and there's some very interesting things in the media about it and some very bizarre conversations people are having with chatbots, but people are working it out as they go along, and it's sort of like, okay, but not sure that's right. I don't know. It's sort of, should you be testing these things on us? And also the corporations, and I think I'd extend corporations to sort of governments. If you think of the sort of Chinese government and the surveillance, they have all the data. What gets really interesting is that you need a huge corpus of data to train these things. And that is being, sort of created through this and, sort of in a way reinforced ourselves. Every time we're interacting with ChatGPT, we're feeding, even more in there. So there is a huge sort of balance of power in terms of the organizations that are able to do this, and some that, and people that aren't. And I think with that, and a little bit comes back to that kind of like mutual destruction and sort of arms race thing, private organizations or commercial companies are highly incentivized to advance. We've seen it in a million different industries. You've seen it in the oil industry, you've seen it in the pharmaceutical industry. Massive corners are cut. Terrible things happen that people find out 20 years later. Industry as a whole, I don't think, again, is a trustworthy thing for our sort of values or to take our values forward. And then we look at control. So we can make these things. Let's say we get the values right. We get the, it's owned by a cooperative. It's not owned by a corporation. And then what happens if we can't turn it off? If it just keeps making paperclips, or we give it the wrong instructions? Can we isolate it? Can we put it in a box? Can we actually control it? We were saying that this is about the humans controlling the AI. Maybe we can just have inputs and outputs to it. How can it get hold of things? And I think there's some examples here. If you think of a scenario, if you as an adult, for some reason, are looking after a bunch of small children, and I think if you're not able to help them, you will do what you can to get out. So if you're the adult that's tied to a chair and you're meant to be looking after some children and you can see they're about to, I don't know, stick their fingers in a plug socket, you will do all you can to get off that chair, even though you might be, agreed that, of course, I'll stay on the chair. So just because a robot sort of escapes or wants to break out, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's doing something bad. It might be trying to help us in some way. So I think when I come back to all of this, where humans fit is really interesting in this, because assuming we could control and assuming, we have some idea of value, that really sort of comes from us. But what worries me is sort of the values that we have and what we're doing and the way it's being developed is not good. And I sort of almost started this sort of idea with Oscar, and I was trying not to be overly negative, but sort of, look, humans are a bit shit, and we've got all this technology, and we're going to destroy the world. So let's look at another scenario. What happens if the machines rule? And so to kind of go into this, and again, if they have the objective of saving the planet or making the planet last as long as possible, again, there's a couple of alternatives they've got. Well, we've got these humans on the planet. They're sort of making a big mess and destroying the planet slowly and a bit of a nuisance. So maybe we could kill all the humans. And, would that make the planet last longer? And again, coming back to that unintended consequences and optimization, sort of, and are we doing something really stupid? Who knows? And then the second side of it is, okay, when I say maintain humans, I mean, that could be give us a beautiful life. What does that actually mean? Sort of, we could be happy as hell. We could be in some sort of enclosure or zoo or something and just put on virtual reality and fed recreational drugs. It could be fantastic. You never know. But, sort of, why is that kind of bad in a way? And you look at, I don't know who's watched Guardians of the Galaxy, but there was this whole, and I think a lot of the other Marvel films are interlinked with it. But there was this character called Thanos, and he was a sort of generally portrayed as a baddie. And his sort of big act was to sort of get these stones of the Infinity Stones from around the universe. And the problem was that the universe was overpopulated and creatures were suffering, basically. And he came up with this idea that if he got all the Infinity Stones and snapped his fingers, half the beings in the universe would just disappear. And he did it, and everyone disappeared. You'll be sorry if that was a spoiler, by the way. Don't worry, there's more. So again, coming back to this kind of maintaining humans, would we really trust the robots, the machines, the AGIs to look after us? Because they maybe have a very pragmatic and objective way of looking at it. And a little bit coming back to the kind of zoo example and what we're actually like as humans. And the reason we would laugh at having VR headsets and taking recreational drugs or whatever it was we enjoyed doing is because I think we know deep down it wouldn't be fulfilling. So if you kind of take the idea that I want to get up to the top of Everest, I want to climb Mount Everest, it's not because I want to get really cold toes. It's not because I just want to be on the top. And if a sort of helicopter appeared and just said, right, I'm going to fly you to the top of Everest, it's got no real value to me. I would probably get cold toes at that point. But what I'm actually interested in is actually walking up Mount Everest. It's actually the challenge. It's the doing. It's the thing. It's the fact that I know it's difficult. So having it given to me isn't really very interesting or useful. So the third group of scenarios was around no AI. It's like, do we just put it back in a box and pretend it never happened, or stop? And it did look at, there have been other examples where technology has gone backwards after the Romans left the UK or Great Britain. Sort of the aqueducts fell down a bit. I think those, I can't remember the name, but the heating systems they had under the floor kind of failed. We just didn't have the technology. We didn't have the money. We didn't have the economy. We didn't have the engineers. And technology actually regressed once the Romans left. And again, there are kind of more famous examples of people who have gone against technology in different ways. The Luddites, which obviously were a group of people that protested against the Industrial Revolution. And in the US, there's the Amish, who live a sort of a life that, sort of doesn't have technology. They reject technology in their life. And, who's to say they're not as happy as us? So, this is possible. But there are some risks with it. It's like, if we don't do it, if you have this kind of, we're going to put AI back in the box, given the kind of pervasiveness of the ability to sort of execute AI and do things, is it not really easy for someone just to go and, open the box over there and then come and say, well, now I am the evil dictator and, sort of overrun the world? So it's a very risky strategy. It's not like nuclear weapons or something where there's a much higher chance of noticing that you're, sort of mining uranium or doing whatever you do to make nuclear weapons. It's much more sort of physical, visible act. So, are there other options about differentiating research and deployment? So can you support the research of AI, but not have the deployment? So I think with all of those sort of things in mind, the kind of question and the kind of, I suppose, reason for being there is what we can do now. So there was one thing I wanted to dive a little bit further about regulation. And I thought I'd start with genetic engineering and Dolly the sheep, and many things I thought I'd never talk about in my life. So this was an example of regulation where it's kind of worked. So DNA manipulation started in around the 70s. There was a conference in 1975 that actually established a set of guidelines for conducting experiments. And they are, experiments are very controlled now. This led to an international treaty. And according to kind of scientists and people around the time, it actually kind of developed a process where sort of scientists or technology leaders could actually develop guidelines and sort of govern new technologies. So not only did it give us an idea that something like genetic engineering could be controlled, but there was a kind of process. And there was a biologist called Paul Berg, who was a Nobel Prize winner, and there was a long quote afterwards. But again, the line or the sentence that sort of struck me was, once scientists from corporations begin to dominate the research enterprise, it'll simply be too late. So again, have we got to that point inadvertently already? Sort of, it feels like it a bit. Other examples would be sort of nuclear and weapons control. So nuclear is a bit, I sort of looked into this and there wasn't such a clear kind of thread for me. On the top left, there's the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was actually run by the US, the Canadian, and the UK governments. So again, there was more control about that. And there is an Atomic Energy Agency. So again, there is this framework for sort of governing what happens. And obviously there's the whole nuclear arms race, and now people are removing and destroying nuclear weapons. So again, there is a history here for sort of controlling it. But I think there's something happened a bit more visible with nuclear, which this is a picture of Chernobyl, which probably, obviously frightened the hell out of the world. And then there's this sort of like very kind of visual image of a sort of, mushroom cloud. And I think where we sort of conceived nuclear, I mean, I sort of grew up in the 70s, and there was this sort of like latent fear of sort of nuclear war or something. So I think we had this much deeper fear of something like nuclear. And I'm not sure we have that with AI. It's a bit more sort of jokey and chat GPT and what's going to happen here. So there's a couple of things in place now, or more than a couple, to be honest. So where I first started, there was an author I mentioned called Max Tegmark. He has set up something called the Future of Life Institute. There's a list of current projects, various people that have, signed up, and they've held a couple of conferences, and they're quite heavy in promoting it. And again, I would recommend his book and having a look at the URLs. But they're not alone. There's actually a lot of people talking about this. There are various other sort of independent organizations, the Partnership on AI. Both the EU and the US government have either bills of rights or government acts about it. The EU Act states that, if you're being talked to by a robot or by an artificial intelligence, it has to declare that that's the case. And again, there are laws coming in, and society or governments will have to change to do this. There are organizations associated with universities. The Centre for Human Compatible AI, I think, is at Berkeley. And then the University of Sussex has, a whole load of research going on. So, conclusion. So where did I get to with all of this? I believed that AGI will be achieved and has the potential to seriously change the world. And unless we do something about it, and I think that was the key bit, I think it will be worse for the majority, if not all people. There's a kind of however, and I think I started this whole process with a kind of, well, humans and machines are ultimately the same. It's just sort of atoms, bytes, and things going round. But I did end up also concluding that humans are different to machines, or maybe things taught through machine learning. And the idea of creativity and new ideas sort of came from a kind of rejection of previous ideas and disobedience, a kind of non-obeying rules. And this kind of like unpredictable or irrational kind of thing that people had was actually what made us sort of either stupid or interesting. And it's like, I think it was sort of summarized by a machine wouldn't make a more intelligent machine to make itself extinct. That's sort of something only we're capable of in a kind of weird, irrational way. And that's kind of us. So, within that, we're not really we are interested in the outcomes. If we walk up Everest or do that kind of thing, we want the experience of doing it. And there's a huge amount of sort of conscious experience and perception in that that's very hard to sort of actually measure. We support the underdog sometimes when we watch a match or do something. Other times we don't. It's just totally nuanced. So as sort of people, this sort of irrationality and disobedience, I think, keeps us separate from the machines. So I think this is the question I'll just get you to all think about. I think it may be one of the panel questions. And that's it.